The control tower tells them that the glide slope is unavailable, it's unusable, it's broken. You don't even need to know what a glide slope is. The key point here is that 3 people in the cockpit of the plane were part of this radio conversation. The captain misunderstands, and he continues under the mistaken assumption that the glide slope is available. The first officer and the flight engineer understand correctly, and they know that the glide slope is unavailable, and they also know that the captain has the mistaken understanding. So these other 2 people in the cockpit have the full correct understanding of the entire situation. What happens next? For the next 2.5 minutes almost, the captain continues to fly at night in the clouds under his mistaken assumption that the glide slope is available. And the first officer and the flight engineer hint at the problem. They gently insinuate to the captain that something might be wrong with the glide slope. They do not at any point say anything clear to the captain along the lines of, hey, we should not continue this approach in this way. By the time when finally the first officer says something clear, prompted to do so by the ground proximity warnings of the aircraft, it's too late and the plane hits the mountain. So what we have here is 2 professionals who allowed a 3rd professional to fly under a very dangerous mistaken assumption, risking their lives, ultimately leading to their deaths, because they were being too polite, because they didn't want to be too blunt, they didn't want to upset the captain, they didn't want to be too direct. Their politeness killed them and over 200 other people in the back. Why do people do that? Why do people allow such dangerous situations to develop for fear of saying something clear? And this happens at all levels. This is an extreme example. But teams are broken by this kind of silence. Companies are broken by this kind of silence. Dreams are broken by this kind of silence. Why do people choose politeness over sincerity when sincerity is the thing that would be clearly better for them? There's 3 reasons, I think, why this is difficult. The first reason for some people is they have a personal shyness or social anxiety of some sort that prevents them from being direct in this way. The second reason is that some people do not have the communication skills. Not everyone who talks makes themselves understood. Sometimes people just don't know how to convey a clear, effective message. And the third reason is that some cultures and some languages are designed around what's called a high context communication. High context communication is when issues are discussed about indirectly. They're insinuated about, they're hinted about. Nothing is addressed directly and frontally. So people are used to talk about things in these ways. These high context communications are typically closely intertwined with very strict and important power hierarchies and respect hierarchies. It is seen as a proof of respect or disrespect how direct you are. And the more direct you are, especially if you are in a more junior kind of position, that is seen as rude and disrespectful. And people are taught to avoid that. So when you speak to someone who is higher in a position of power, you're supposed to be very subtle about how you convey your needs, your concerns, or how you bring up problems. And while this can work in a number of situations, obviously it works for these entire societies which operate in this way, it does not work when it comes to directly, assertively, efficiently, and urgently clarify something and make an important decision, like we just saw in the Korean Airlines Flight 801 example. Look, politeness in a certain sense of the word is not bad. A sense of decorum, a good choice of words, mutual respect, that kind of politeness is always good. Also, I'm not saying you should bluntly address any issue and fight every battle which is presented to you. Some things are just not worth getting into. But when you know you have to say something, or you want to say something, or you feel you should say something, but you don't because you get stopped by that fuzzy feeling that maybe you're not going to be polite enough by saying that something, I highly encourage you to get over that feeling and just assertively communicate what you have to say. You may ruffle some feathers, maybe, but it's going to save you a lot more hurt in the future.